Hey, Amy,
Danielle.
how are you?
I'm
Hey,
great.
everybody. We are at our next segment of Let's Talk with Amy and
Yes.
Danielle. Amy, what are we talking about today?
We are talking about advocating for school-age children. So what you need to know about CSEs, IEPs, 504's. So that's what we're going to discuss today.
Wow, so you just said like a lot of letters.
I did. So a CSE is a Committee on Special Education. An
Okay,
IEP is an individual education plan.
okay.
So a committee for special education will review your child's needs. There's a whole bunch of things we're going to talk about, who can get this review, time frames, things like that. An individualized education plan for your child will be specific to your child. By law, your child is allowed to get one of these plans, but they have to meet a special criteria.
Okay.
So anything that's going on with them that might impede their education might be covered by an IEP plan.
Right. So, from my understanding, there are 13 criteria that a child can be classified for a IEP or to get special ed services in a school. And the 13 criteria are, I have to look at my paper because I don't have them. Autism, blindness, deafness, emotional disturbance, hearing impaired, intellectual disabilities, multiple disabilities, orthopedic impairment, other health impaired, or a specific learning disability. So those are the 13. So I think it's really important that your child doesn't have to have an extreme diagnosis or something crazy to meet one of those criteria, but it is important that there be a medical diagnosis in order to get one of those criteria, especially when we're talking about special ed services for kids in kindergarten and up. Sometimes when kids are under CPSE or early intervention or special ed for preschool special ed, sometimes like a mild speech impairment or some mild deficits without a medical diagnosis will qualify. But once they start school and are in kindergarten, it's pretty important that there be some sort of medical diagnosis in order to fit one of those 13 criteria.
Exactly. And then I think going into that.
Oh, wait, I missed because it ran on to page 2. I didn't list 13. The other 3 that I missed, I only listed 10. Speech and language impairment, traumatic brain injury, and a visual impairment.
Yes.
Not exactly sure what the difference between visual impairment and blindness is, but I'm not a doctor. So.
We like severe limitations as opposed to no visual. Also, 504's. So your child may not need, may have a, I don't know what you'd call it, like a slight disability or something. Maybe they have anxiety, but it's not to the point of completely overwhelming their life.
I think anxiety is a really good example because anxiety really would only fall under the emotional disturbance category, and it would have to be very extreme for it to qualify for that. So I think anxiety is a really good example of a kid who could potentially be eligible for a 504.
Yeah, and it's just going to ensure their academic success, ensure their ability to learn with some kind of modified plan, but it doesn't mean that, some parents worry, well, does that mean they're removed from the class and put into a special education class? No, they're going to meet your child needs where they are, but you need to have them like a diagnose, and your doctor or therapist or whoever you're working with can make that clear. And when you go to a meeting, it's all going to be sussed out, and we're going to kind of talk about that now.
Yeah.
So how the process goes.
So this process starts by referral. So anybody can make a referral for a child to be evaluated by special ed. Most of the time, referral comes from the parents. So if you feel like your child is not doing well in school based on a diagnosis or based on a need that's not being met in the building, you can request an evaluation for special ed services. The request should always be in writing. It's really important that whatever you do, you document, because there are timelines that they need to follow. during this process. So you request it. Then after you make the request, they're going to send you paperwork because you have to sign consents. So it's important that you do all these things in a timely manner because, again, there's a timeline.
Yeah.
And you don't want to do anything to hold up the timeliness of this. Because the sooner we get that, you get the evaluation, the sooner the potential services can begin.
Yeah, so and make copies of everything. They're going to send you things. You're going to have the referral. Make yourself a folder so you can stay on top of it. Because the next piece is evaluation, and they have 60 calendar days to complete an evaluation of your child. So you want to make sure that you have everything written down, times, dates, and have copies of all the information. Because you know, if someone does misplace something or someone misses a time frame, you can go back to them because you have it in writing or you made a note of it or you have your email. So that's always
if at all possible. I always recommend that parents hand deliver their stuff to
absolutely
the Department of Special Ed for their district, usually Student Support Services, and make sure they date and time stamp it. You want to stamp copy of when it was received, and then I always have a backup as I go home and I shoot an email saying, just want to follow up that I dropped off blah 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 today, and I had it stamped by Mrs. So-and-so at 3:30. So you not only have the date stamped copy, but then you have a follow-up. So whoever needs to get that paperwork can say, hey, did Mrs. So-and-so drop off these papers? So they're actually on the lookout for it because, you know, people are busy, papers get lost. So you want to make sure that your paperwork, your child's stuff stays at the top of the pile.
Yeah, I agree. It's always best if you can hand deliver it. I mean, I know we always can't.
Yeah.
If you can't, you know, get a delivery receipt or get a signature. That way, at least you have something physical in your hand that shows, actually, no, it was delivered. And it says here that Mrs. Smith signed for it. And that's probably going to be the secretary or the person at the door. Yep. So always have that, or else, because we don't want the process to start over again. You don't want to go another 60 days.
And you don't want them to say, oh, you didn't hand this in, that's why it's behind. You always want to be able to justify what you've done. After they do the evaluation, so, and I always say in my request for evaluation, ask for a comprehensive evaluation. So ask for speech and language, OT, PT, any possible evaluation, because, you know, in my own personal case, we've discovered that sometimes there's a deficit that we weren't aware of that could be impacting another function. So, you know, a child who has an OT deficit might be not doing well in writing, but it actually might be physiological. It might be a bad pencil grip, might be poor core strength, bad strength, that's making them avoidant of another task. So I think when you ask for the evaluations, you should ask for a comprehensive, everything, speech and language, OT, PT, a full educational panel. So I think that's pretty important.
Yeah, I agree. And these are services, these are professionals that work for the school. So professionals are providing these tests. They're free. You know, it's the school system. So, I mean, you can always disagree, but the point is these are professionals. They know what they're doing. You know, they have degrees. So don't be afraid that there's just some random person performing this, you know, PT evaluation on your child. You know, they have to be certified in what they're doing.
There's certain credentials, and when you go to CSE, they'll be able to tell you what those credentials are and what they were. So after the evaluations come back, you will get a copy. You are allowed to share those copies with people, professionals who are in your circle that maybe can give you advice. Then there's going to be an IEP meeting. So there's going to be a meeting to go over the findings. You are allowed to have whoever you want at that meeting. You could have your auntie, you could have your sister, you could have whoever you want. You can bring an advocate, you can bring support people, because sometimes the meetings can be really intimidating. You know, they have like a million people on the other side of the table, and sometimes it's like the lone parent sitting on the side of the table. Yeah. So it's just nice to sometimes have a physical person. It's also nice to have a second set of ears who maybe is not emotional, maybe who is not, it's not their child, so they can really hear it impartially on your behalf. Because sometimes when emotions are involved and they're telling you that there's a potential deficit with your child, our emotions cloud our judgment and sometimes what we hear.
They do. And always bringing someone who can support you is recommended. And, you know, like Danielle said, even when you first get that report before you go in, having someone look at it if you can. I have a friend who's a special ed teacher in a different district. So I called her and I said, can I show you this? Tell me what to ask. So I know I have to go in by myself. I didn't have a support person with me at the time that could go in. So I'm like, tell me what to ask. Go over these, tell me what they mean, make sure I'm understanding what I'm seeing. What can I, and I asked her, what can I ask for? Legitimately, what am I allowed to ask for? I mean, I have training in education, but this was a spot where I'm like, okay, well, I know what I want my kid to get, but what can I ask for? What should I push? So if you have people, whether it's the coalition or a teacher or, you know, someone in your circle who has worked with children and done this themselves as a parent, ask them, like, all right, what does my school district do? What are they willing to do? And if I push hard enough, will they give me this? How often do they grant that? So talk to people. Don't be afraid to ask people for help.
Yeah. So I think that gets to the next question of what kind of accommodations. And I think in this piece, the thing you need to know is that you're the expert. So if there's something you do at home during homework, you know, does your kid do homework better like with music on or laying on the floor or sitting on the trampoline? Or if there's something that happens at home that you find is really, really effective in supporting your child, in sort of focusing, or wherever the deficit is, bring that information to the school. You're the expert. You know your child best. You know what your child needs. And just because you might not know how that could look in a school setting, that doesn't mean that you don't know what's best for your child. It's their job to figure out how to make that work in a school setting. But it's your job to sort of say, hey, I know this works for my kid. My kid needs to eat 5 times a day. My kid needs whatever they potentially need or works. Loud noises bother them. They do better with background noise. They do better sitting close to me or sitting far away from me, or when I'm sitting next to them, that's a problem. So I think knowing what helps your child, even at home, even when you're out in the community, can really sometimes be transferred into accommodations in a school setting.
Yeah, and there's something to be said for proximity. That's something that comes up a lot, you know, how close they need to be to another person. The background noise is also an issue. I know plenty of kids who have headphones and are allowed to listen to their music while they're doing a test or whatever. Chewing, gum chewing, holding something.
Has that IEP that she has. I send hard bubblegum to school in Ziplocs, and there's lots of rules around the Ziploc, but she can have gum whenever she wants. Another one that I think is really important for people to realize, I think schools go to is, especially with a child who manifests like with an ADHD symptom or distractibility, they say preferential seating in the front of the classroom, preferential seating close to the teacher. For our kids who have trauma in their background, sometimes that's the worst possible place to put them.
Yeah.
They do not respond well to people speaking behind them, having a lot of people behind them, being that close to an adult or an authority figure. We've seen it in a lot of cases, sometimes preferential seating the last seat in the classroom, so they don't have people behind them, is sometimes helpful. So, you know, sometimes what the school suggests is not always right. They sort of have a go-to, but if they're not real trauma informed, they might not fully understand the impact of trauma on your child. So I think that's kind of important to think about also, is how your child responds to certain things, people standing behind them and things like that, because kids who have from hard places sometimes respond differently than your typical child.
And your child can be involved, and you can ask your child, like, where are you most comfortable sitting? And they need to know that these are things that there are still rules. It's still school. You know, you can't, you know, we're trying to stop you from jumping up and down on your desk, because then that rolls into this and that rolls into that. So if you need to move around, all right, you've got these 4 passes. So you get up quietly, you go out, you walk to Mrs. So-and-so's class, and you walk back and you sit down and you resume. So there's going to be some child involvement at some point, but knowing that, all right, we're all here to help you. We realize you're struggling with this. You know, what's your input? There's no reason that that you can't say to your child, what do you think you need?
Yeah.
Because then they
No, I
feel like
agree.
they're heard. And a lot of times, I think people forget, oddly, like it's about the child, but people forget to actually say to the child, like, what do you think you need? What would help you?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that's a great point. I think the one, so the other thing that we need to remember is that when you get to the meeting, if you don't agree with the direction of the meeting
Yeah.
or how things are going or what services they're offering, you have a right to not consent. You have a right to ask to adjourn the meeting and bring an expert back. You have a right to adjourn the meeting and bring an advocate back. If there's something that you are not comfortable with, you don't have to sign. You don't have to consent. You can ask for the meeting to be adjourned so you can bring a support person back or gather more information. That's really important. I think sometimes those meetings are intimidating and parents feel like, oh, they know better. I really want to stress the point that you know better. And ultimately being informed and making sure that you feel heard and that you're fully comfortable with the plan, that you really think the plan is what's in best interest of your child. And if they say, because a lot of times we hear, oh, it's not educationally relevant. If you feel like your child deserves services and the school is denying them, you have a right to go to a fair hearing. You have a right to request another evaluation, a new CSE. You don't have to stop just because they said no.
Yeah, agreed.
So,
but you can be your child's biggest advocate. You know, whether they're your foster child, whether they're an adopted child, whether a biological child, doesn't matter how they're with you. You can be their biggest advocate.
Right, I agree.
Yeah.
So, we could talk for hours. There's just so much information about this, but I think those are the basics. And if you have questions or you have concerns or you have specific things, you can always reach out to the coalition. You can reach out to our helpline 24 hours a day. You can call our regular phone during the day, and we at the coalition will either connect you with services that do exactly educational supports, or the coalition themselves can give you advice and support in advocating for your child in this setting. So I hope that we were helpful today a little bit. And if there's more information that you need, reach out, give us a call, and look for Danielle and Amy at our next Let's Talk segment.
Yeah.
Amy, what are we talking about the next time?
Next time we're talking about LGBTQ plus and how
my fave.
Your favorite. So, and how this, can affect your child, especially if you have a child who is placed with you via the foster system or an adopted child. So, we're going to discuss all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so more acronyms. We are going to call it Let's Talk About Acronyms.
Let's talk about acronyms.
Because I feel like every week we're talking about a new acronym and all these letters that sort of get thrown around. So LGBTQ plus will be our next topic. Stay tuned.
All right.
Amy, stay safe. And what, as Pat says, stay wash.
Be wash. Be well and stay healthy.
Stay home. Or stay home.
Stay home? All right.
I don't know. We're going to have to double check, and we will end with Pat's acronym because he loves acronyms.
He does. So be wash.
Bye.